Hello, everybody. This is Rick Miller, and this week I will be reviewing bureaucracy and its what I view many complexities that have been created since the inception of our government. Now, when it comes to bureaucracy, initially it gets its inception essentially from Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, in which it's outlined that the president gets to appoint those people in heads of departments. Of course, at the time the Constitution was created, uh, there weren't that many bureaus. Bureaucracy was very limited. You had, I believe, you had the Army and Air Force, or Army and Navy, and then very limited bureaus after that point. So, to an extent, bureaucracy at the very beginning of our government was very simple. It was not very hard for the President of the United States to govern or oversee or have those that he's appointed that are overseeing these various departments to for those departments to be at least tracked and maintained, and government was very limited. And then when we start looking at bureaucracy and its relationship to dual federalism, and which is a separation between the federal government and states, or you have the cooperative federalism, which we see much more prominently now, where national policies intermingle with state policies, and mostly due because of funding. The federal government has a much heavier say in funding as we are situated in nowadays, and this is essentially where I happen to see a problem with bureaucracy as it stands, because at this point in time, especially once bureaucracy really starts getting a little chaotic and busy with in the 50s and 60s, what we essentially have are many bureaus being created because our country is expanding, our country's evolving, and more and more government officials feel that we need more bureaus or more departments. Now, what that leads to, with especially what I see in bureaucracies, more so than ever before, we have a very complicated system now. I mean, as you can see from my slides here, just look at the Secretary of State Department, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. These are by no means the full organization chart, but you have the President of the United States that has appointed people to oversee these departments, and these departments are now very voluminous in size. And aside from these three, there's many more. So it leads me, in reading the American System from Grodzins, simplification is needed with these departments, with the government itself, with bureaucracies. How are the American people to understand or comprehend what their government is doing when there are so many bureaucracies and so many departments that I feel it's virtually impossible for one person at an organizational level to oversee and know exactly what is happening with all of these departments. Plus, you take into account all these departments and you have new people being appointed. That creates a whole new direction, a whole new directives, opinions from those at the top that will essentially create a trickle down effect throughout these organizations and throughout the bureaucracies that where once you were doing something one way, now it's believed to be more appropriate or more expedient to do it another way, which again, leading back to my argument, further complicates bureaucracy. And I think this is why we have so many frustrations within our American government at this time. So, in my view, I think bureaucracy really needs to have has to take a step back. It needs to be simplified. As you can see from a quote here from Leonardo da Vinci, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And that little graph there on the right, effectiveness and simplicity, the more we can simplify something, the more effective it can become. Why? Because if you have a common directive and a common theme, it's easier for people to follow. It's easier for people to understand. And that creates, in my opinion, what I believe to be a more effective bureaucracy. And in another point that I argue, I think dual federalism, while I understand the nature of cooperative federalism and why it's important, I purely see that as a funding mechanism for for states. And if you have dual federalism, I think the federal government needs to be removed more from what individual states can do for the people that live in each state. I think we've gotten to a point where we've started to overcomplicate everything, and with the federal government being involved so heavily in what states are trying to accomplish, it really just muddies the water. So these are my references. And in closing, really, just in our readings and from what we know, I think bureaucracy needs to be simplified. I refer heavily to Grodzins and his belief that we really need to streamline and simplify bureaucracy. In achieving that, if we can, which therein lies the question, I don't know, but if we can achieve that, we can simplify things. The American people can understand what is happening within bureaucracies, and ultimately, I think it leads to a more productive and prosperous government overall. So that's my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Thank you.